Hello and a warm welcome to another episode. My guest today is Richard Schenzel, Managing Director in Northern Europe at Scale. Building a revenue organization is tough, and that's why Richard and myself are discussing the building blocks for your go-to-market motion. And as a spoiler, we will talk about average sales cycle, average deal size, seniority of your buying persona, and the complexity of the product. Welcome, Richard. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, good morning, Björn.
So before we dive into you and your background, so the topic of today is go-to-market motions with focus on sales. You said is it the end of the BDR, SDR, AE setup, or what's in there? Either way, it's a super great topic. I'm happy to talk with you in detail about. But before we dive into the topic, maybe a few words about yourself.
Sure, and thanks a lot for the warm welcome. My name is Richard, working for a company called At Scale. We are a group of operating partners helping companies to structure their commercial organizations to improve basically top-line performance. We are a group of former VP sales and former CROs that have done the job themselves. And we are helping founders to structure their organization to become more efficient in a very hands-on delivery. So it's not that we are consultants necessarily, that we show the frameworks, how it's done, we run a workshop. No, we are actually there to implement as well, because for us, the adoption is the most important takeaway or deliverable. And we try to help founders to focus on building their own company while we take care of their commercial organization and restructure this to become more efficient. And we do this based on a methodology based on 8 building blocks, because we're not consultants. We have a board of advisors with some people from Bain, from McKinsey, hardcore consultancy companies that helped us to structure a methodology. And we are focusing on hiring and on onboarding of people to set the ramp up phase in a faster manner. Sales enablement, performance management, talent management, really focused on the people itself. And then on the background, we look at the mechanics behind the demand generation, sales execution, client relationship, and in the end, revenue operations as well. So very broad, and we always pick a few items, a few building blocks that are most relevant for our customers.
Yeah, our approach is pretty similar. I think I tackle more the early stage, and you more in the scale up area. But
Correct.
Either way, I'm super happy because, like you said, it's not just kind of fancy theory. It's kind of backed with real data, and that's why I would say let's jump into the reality, because at latest I would say it started last year, the discussion: do we need SDR, BDR, and AE setups? I think it was also driven by the kind of unit economics, because at some point CAC payback was an issue. But what was your tipping point, or where did you think, okay, this is getting serious, this is a serious topic?
First of all, I think it's a topic that is going on for a while right now, and it's a very logical system preached by a book called Predictable Revenue from Aaron Ross. Beautiful example about Salesforce.com. And that system was basically copy-pasted into many CRO playbooks and rolled out without asking ourselves if this was the right way to set it up. And I don't say it's a bad system. It should work for your organization. And I would like to challenge founders as well to really assess their organization and what go-to-market motion they should apply. Do not copy just blindly the SDR AE motion because of the unit economics. It should work for you. You should have a look at your ACV, the length of your sales cycle, the complexity of the implementation of your product, the seniority of your buyer, the amount of stakeholders on the buyer side. These are all critical KPIs, I would like to say, to assess or assets that you should assess what type of go-to-market motion you should apply. If your ACV is rather low, I would say below 15K a year, it's almost too hard to make it profitable. As you said, the CAC to LTV is going to be very tough. You need to have like a very fast cycle there to make it work. So these are all elements that you should assess to see what type of go-to-market motion you should apply.
Love it. So then I would say, let's dive into it, because some of the listeners might have read the book or the publications about winning by design. It's kind of the classic one, at least in my little bubble. So it's
Yeah,
kind of 10 to 15K. This is pure sales led or outbound led. It's not going to work in terms of unit economics. And then it's a question whether we look at LTV CAC ratio, or for, I'm personally a big fan of CAC payback, because
yeah,
LTV, if you do not have the data for 3 years, it's kind of just fantasy.
correct.
But I would love to, because I hear it all the time and say, okay, Björn, can you just do simple math and back it up? Because to digest it, because it's for a lot of people, it's still unthinkable. Why is the kind of 15 or 10K threshold is a fundamental piece to decide whether this should need support by marketing or any other party versus sales led? So I would be curious to hear your thoughts and how you justify or help founders to understand that this is probably not a healthy setup to start with.
Yeah, like you should have a high sales velocity if when the ACV is lower. Think about it. How many teams are involved in your deals? You have marketing teams. There's an SDR or a BDR involved. You have an AE. Maybe there's a implementation manager or pre-sales or like sales solutions. There's a customer success, maybe even account manager. Like if we look at all the roles that you have in your organization, you get very like a big organization, which is first of all hard to manage. Second of all, if you see how many touch points there are on the buyer side, there's so many people involved, which can get very costly. That's one thing about the cost side. On the other side, it's the buyer experience as well. A buyer gets in touch with an SDR, there's initial interest, then we go to an AE, they do the demo, do the closing, then there is a solution manager for the implementation, there's another handover. Like you see so many people in a short period of time, and you're building a relationship in the first months. That's where you really make the difference. And if you have 4-5 different personas within your company touching one deal in over the course of 3 months, it can become very confusing as well. We all know the game when we were a child, where you had to whisper an animal or an object, and by the time you get to the end of the round, the object completely changed. This will happen. This will happen with handovers as well if you don't have the right process.
Yeah.
So you will lose a lot of information. It's damaging the relationship with your customer. So it's one side, cost side. Second part is the buyer experience as well, and the beginning of the buyer experience will lead to the long-term relationship with your customer as well. If they're shaky in the beginning, the chances on churn are higher at the end as well.
Yeah. And I would add another component, which is the employee perspective. Because if you just have a kind of even almost like a manufacturing process, I know it sounds great in theory, yeah, that you have someone is just qualifying inbound leads, then handing over where it gets interesting to kind of an AE or whatever. The same is I do the hard work and do kind of 100 calls a day, get 99 no's. And as soon as I reach out, then I pass it over. So at least in Europe, I think it's quite hard to find a lot of people who are willing to stay in this role forever. And then even kind of coming from a management perspective, even if this doesn't make sense. So this is what I'm thinking out loud, is another component, hard to scale, just putting apart the unit economics for a while.
Correct.
So I like this. So we have the ACV in the kind of a rough guidance before, even if we think that this is a nice process or it could make sense, below 15K, I would also say don't do it or be very, very careful. The other way is kind of, if we'll still, and whether you call it marketing led or marketing supported or sales assisted, there again, I would say be careful below 10K.
100%.
Because there again, and all the founders who are still skeptical, like you were saying, if you adding up all the costs for a little bit of marketing support, SDR, BDR, you name it, if you're adding it up and then make a very simple math behind it or put math behind it, what kind of number of contracts do I need to justify a CAC payback period below 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and then another effect that I've seen over the last 12 to 18 months as well is that demand dropped across the board. Loads of startups and scale-ups were very fortunate to get a lot of inbound leads, and it was just a follow-up by SDRs, AEs. Was kind of like hand-holding, hand raises to go through to get them through the process. Now, when now demand is dropping, SDRs have a harder job to create pipeline, and I've seen organizations where the agendas of AEs were rather empty, and I think we created a generation of AEs that is kind of like, for them it's normal that all those things are arranged for them, all those meetings were arranged, like all the tooling, etc. But now when times are changing, you can really see the difference between AEs that were raised at that time or AEs that had experience before and are willing to step up their game and to go to market themselves again. Because what you will see is that you should change your organization from inbound to outbound when demand is dropping. Do you have the right people in place? I've seen multiple organizations where they were struggling with this challenge, and they were unable to pivot basically their way of working from inbound to outbound. They were trying to push more resources into marketing to capture more demand, didn't work out, but then you have a very costly team.
Yeah.
So how do you educate your team to transition them to an outbound motion? Or do you have the right team in place overall? Because if someone is used to receiving inbounds or meetings in their agenda, running demos and do the closing by themselves, are they actually willing to step up their game and to add the prospecting side to it as well? Because it's a completely different ball game. So it's not given that an AE you can train an AE on this. It's a very personal thing as well. So make sure that you have the right people at desk. And when you're sure that you have the right people, just train them as well. It's not only pushing more resources in terms of money into marketing channels, which is a good idea, of course, but make sure that you allocate budget for training, upskilling your sales team as well. That's where you can make the difference against your competitor.
Yeah, it's a really good remark. And again, one thing is kind of looking at the numbers. And the other thing, like you were describing, I also see a tremendous culture change in go-to-market and or sales organizations, because like you were saying beforehand, it was kind of it's not an easy way. It's never
relatively
easy, but it was the food were served, or at least the appetizer were served to the AEs, or a lot of AEs, and now they have to kind of do prospecting as well. And it's one thing to see the necessity from a company perspective and say, okay, we have to act in this regard. The other thing is, am I willing to do prospecting work as an AE? Because before I was just doing discoveries. And I think this is not to, especially bearing in mind time restriction in startups overall or in general. I think this is it's a tough situation for founders to decide, is it the right person at the right time, to put it that frankly. Because when I was checking your list, and I really liked this, it was kind of the ACV, you were looking at the average deal cycle or sales cycle, seniority of the person, and complexity of the product. So just picking up your thoughts about now AEs have to do the prospecting, and also depending on the complexity of the product, I can either handle it entirely by myself, or I need kind of a sales engineer, I need a product engineer looped in. So what's your picture on that? How to build kind of very effective sales organizations, bearing in mind this kind of complexity of the product item?
Yeah. First of all, it's about transferring knowledge, because you need to become an industry expert, a subject matter expert to sell. But what I've seen over the last months of 1.5 years as well, that when people get under pressure, they get more creative and they start the kind of spray and pray game. And I think that's something to, especially if the product is rather complex, have a look at your current use cases. What are your successful customers, and how can you replicate the success? How can you apply some customer modeling, define a very clear ICP, because I still see companies that do not have this fully articulated throughout the entire organization. I see founders have an idea of an ICP and the AEs have an idea of an ICP, but it's not matched. Make sure that it's articulated from founders, management, marketing, sales, customer success, that everybody knows where to focus on, and what is the persona, what's the buyer persona, how many personas are involved, and what's the first persona to get in contact with, and study this persona. I think we should stop selling to people, which sounds weird in this podcast, but I think we should help people to buy. And we need to have a look at their buying cycle, their buyer journey, and we need to adapt our way of selling towards this journey. This has always been the case. This is not new, but I think we kind of forgotten it because it went so well over the last years, and now we are under pressure. We are trying to be creative and go spray and pray, go after every industry, every size, just to sell something. But if your product is rather complex, make sure that you hit the nail on the head from day one. Make sure that your pitch is ready and that you provide value to your buyer. So it's not just mass emailing, sequences, etc. We've seen a massive email fatigue. I think emails sent out by marketing and sales went up by 15 or 18%. Open rates dropped massively as well. So it's not the way to go. It's all about building meaningful relationships. And that's why it's so important to understand, first of all, your product, but second of all, the solution of your product. What does it solve? How do you make the life of your buyer easier? How can you help them to be successful in their organization? So stop selling, start helping them to buy, and make sure that you have an understanding of the seniority of your buyer persona. Make sure that you speak on the same level, that you read what they are reading, that you are where they are. It's all about meeting them and building meaningful relationships by providing value rather than just sending out email campaigns.
Love it. You definitely get the quote on my billboard for stop selling and help the buyer to get to the product. As I think it resonates very well. There's and you probably as well, there's a lot of discussion, at least in my little bubble, about buyer-led growth and how to restructure the process. And I also, it totally resonates to me as well regarding the ICP. It's kind of, a lot of people say that they have it and they are clear about the value proposition. If you ask the founder, if you ask marketing, sales, and also ask customer success or post-purchase, what kind of message and what kind of expectation is actually there with customers. So I would put it there. Often there is some room for improvement, I would say. But coming back to the complexity, because I have, for example, I have a client in pharma. So they have an average deal size. They start at 150K up to $1 million. So it's really, really enterprise. And you said become an expert in your industry. And we have a lot of discussion. Is it one person who is really becoming this expert in the industry? And or what are kind of criteria, or what are kind of your tips and tricks and experiences when to loop in a really, really functional expert, like a consultant, an engineer, or whatever we call it, industry expert? Mm-hmm. I think you have an opinion on that, how to structure sales or go-to-market teams in that regard.
Yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of team selling. It's not that you need to have one person that knows it all. Depends on the complexity and the length of your sales cycle, obviously. But in deals like you're describing, it's quite normal to create a team. It's very important to show to your buyer as well where they will work with. You could even introduce the account manager or the customer success already from a very early stage with these type of deals, so they know from the start who's the day-to-day contact later on. I think the moment to introduce your product expert or your solution engineer, or how you want to call it, is when the discussions are rather technical. So I think it's more like the commercial or like conversation, and then the commercial relationship starts with the AE, and that can go about like contracts and that kind of things, the mechanics around it. But when it goes deeper into the product itself, into the use case, I would always include an engineer or experts or technical staff from the organization, to show that you are a team as well. You are the face of the company in the beginning, but it doesn't mean that you are the company just by yourself. And it's about presenting that team from the moment it makes sense. So that's like the first meetings are the majority of the time more about the commercial relationship itself. But when the questions get more technical, deeper, make sure that you have an expert with you in the call to present yourselves as a team.
Yeah. And I really like what you said. If either you have kind of a product or technical engineer or a specialist looped in, depending, of course, on the company size, or you have someone from customer success or post-purchase who is normally a little bit more technical and more attached to the product to loop in. You already have you're anticipating we become customers, and then you know that person. I really like it. And also for lean organizations, totally makes sense to partner up with sales in that aspect already.
Yeah, I think it's very important to agree on this internally as well. Some people are keen to be part of the process early on, but you need to determine internally yourself what's the trigger to include a customer success or an account manager, when to include a sales engineer, because it can become quite costly if you have all three of them in all the calls.
Yeah.
So make sure that there is a meaningful conversation, that the deal is really activated, and there is a mutual interest before you include these personas internally.
Yeah. What I'm thinking out as of now, I'm writing my go-to-market book, as you know, and one of the things which drives me day and night is everyone is looking at LTV to CAC or CAC payback period, but it's still, if we're talking about complex enterprise deals which are taking 6-12 months, it's still a long time to have a warning system whether kind of we are off in our sales organization. And the thing I'm thinking out loud is, have you any experience with tracking the cost of an SQL and the cost of a proper opportunity? Of course, if the qualification system is right, as a kind of leading indicator for the efficiency of my sales team.
I think you need to break down the steps indeed. With a shorter sales cycle, with a higher sales velocity, it's easier to measure, since you can basically build a model around your close won revenue, and then work out from there. Which in enterprises is harder indeed, and I think you need to break down your sales process. What are the typical steps that you have in the process, and you break it down to smaller milestones and track it down there. So because the close won and revenue takes longer,
exactly,
it's higher as well. But you need to have an indicator at some point if you are on track or not. That's why it's super hard to track the ramp up time of a new AE for enterprise, if the sales cycle is 9 to 12 months, where you normally want to assess within 3 to 6 months if someone is successful. So you need to break it down to milestones. For me, it's hard to say right now because every organization is different. But I think it's very important. I would like to challenge founders to dig deeper into the sales process and what are the smaller milestones, and track the progress on those smaller milestones. And I think that's easily forgotten because a lot of organizations do only look at close won. Even if the sales velocity is higher, I've seen so many companies where they have a very or too lengthy sales process, in my opinion. For a 2-3 month sales cycle, they have 8 to 10 steps, which you can simplify.
Yeah.
But the monitoring of the conversion rate from stage to stage is rather poor as well. And that's with any organization. If it's SMB, mid-market, or enterprise, do track the progress from stage to stage. It's up to you as an organization to determine the steps. What are conversions for you? And I think that's the same for enterprise as well.
Yeah. Don't open up the box, the Pandora's box of sales qualification and data. I think we could easily fill an hour discussing on that. And
it's gonna be another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're always welcome. You know that. But what I learned at least in early stage startups, it's one thing is to tell them that you should need that and that you get more clarity on forecast and more reliability. And then at some point I said, okay, I need something which is more crunchy, because what they understand is at latest, if they talk to investors, it's okay, what impact does this conversion thing has on my CAC payback or LTV to CAC ratio? And that's why I'm circling back, even if it's kind of a rougher guess, to say, okay, the monthly SQL or the monthly cost per SQL or opportunity, depending on your sales process, is amount X. And last month it was amount Y. And out of the sudden, it kind of kicks in and say, okay, yeah, that's an indicator what will come in X amount depending on the sales velocity. It's
a tough one, because it's there are a lot of ifs here.
It's never easy.
No, absolutely not. No, that's correct.
All right, then I would say let's wrap it up and say, okay, what did we learn? Because we started, because I would say this is a classic one, or at least a classic for some of you. Look at the ACV. Overall, they're at least kind of guiding frameworks or road tracks to say, okay, what kind of motion is it with a SDR AE setup? Is it full cycle? Is it marketing supported? Is it product supported? So ACV is a good indicator, I would say. The other thing also, what I say is relatively easy to assess on a higher level is the complexity of the product. So because then the more complex it is, I need more touch points. I probably need different roles, which correlates with the length of the sales cycle and the stakeholders involved. What we haven't fully covered yet is, and I really like this as well, is the seniority of the persona. Because when we talked to still kind of facing early stage and startups and scale-ups, this is something which I think also got neglected or underestimated during the last month, is I cannot handle a decent seniority of a persona with an untrained or super junior person. But I think you have much more thoughts on that.
Correct. Yeah, like imagine you are selling to C-level, or you're selling a finance product to a CFO. And traditionally, SDRs, BDRs are relatively young in their career. So they have a few tasks. They are learning how to work, they are learning how to sell, and they're learning about your product. So they are developing on three elements. Where you would actually like to have someone only learning about your product, because the other two, like they need to do it somewhere. So it's quite generous that you provide a role and that you provide a space where people can learn how to work and learn how to sell. But can you facilitate all three while you're selling to C-level, to a CFO that is in market for decades? That have a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience. How are you gonna match the buyer journey there? So again, it's all about stop buying and make sure that you help them, stop selling and help them to buy. And how can you match to the buyer persona if you have a very junior person, young in their career, that is actually trying to figure out multiple things: the market, the product, how to sell overall, how to structure their daily work, how to work overall. So they are trying to find out so many things, which is important, but can you facilitate? Do you have the organization to absorb all these elements at the same time? You should have a very good onboarding system and an internal academy to facilitate success for SDRs. And that's something that I haven't seen too often. So I would rather say, like, if the seniority of your buyer persona plays an important role because you're selling to C-level, to CSO, CEOs, CFOs, make sure that you have someone that is a on-point sparring partner for your buyer persona.
Yeah, and I would totally agree on that. And I recently read something on LinkedIn, and we do it with our pharma client. I do the same. Is they experimented with SDRs, junior SDRs, to get into kind of business unit leader. So basically, they are managing directors in big pharmas, and you have no chance to start on eye level with them. So it's kind of a totally it's a poor buyer experience and a waste of resources 100%. to start to have this set up. So it always looks easier from looking backwards than forward, but I think we have shared the same learnings and also backed up with client experiences.
100%. Yeah.
All right. So then I would say we have learned, and hopefully you got a lot out of it. So if you look at the go-to-market motion, ACV is a classic one, but also look at the complexity of the product, and then also the sales length and the basically the decision-making unit overall, but in particular about the seniority level of the persona. Is there anything else I missed, Richard?
Nope.
Then I personally thank you for being spending time with me. And I have one last personal question. What are you learning as of now that you do not master well yet?
Or what I want to learn this year?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a very good question. You got me off guard here. Sorry
about that.
No worries. One of the things where I'm focusing on right now to get my head around is setting up partnership sales from the start. I've been working in companies where this was already established. I have seen a lot of companies that have very much success with this channel, but how to build this from scratch is something that I'm keen to learn this year. I have surrounded myself with some people that are experts on this, and this is where I see a big advantage for founders as well. So I'm trying to add this to my toolbox.
Nice.
To pay forward to founders this year or end of this year, hopefully as well.
Yeah, it's another fascinating topic, also covered in one of the episodes, but there's so much out of it. So I'm super curious what you will come up with, probably with a proper framework and methodology backed by. So looking forward to that. And first of all, thanks again, and have a wonderful day, Richard.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.